Hey everyone, Lesley Myrick here. I am Nancy Ganzekaufer's associate coach and also a practicing interior designer. I am here today with the fabulous Masha Koyen, and she is teaching us. And don't go away because I know you're like, AI, it's everywhere. Trust us, you want to listen to this. Masha is teaching about how designers can use AI for their interior design business. And this is such a buzzy topic. I know it can be overwhelming. There's that tech scariness of it, but I promise Masha's going to make this doable for all of us. So welcome, Masha.
Thanks, Lesley. So nice to be here and talk about AI. Well, specifically Chat GPT. There are so many tools out there, but we're talking about Chat GPT. I feel like that's the easiest one, the most user-friendly to use, and for interior designers. And we're talking about the words. We're not talking about the visual side of AI.
That is a good distinction because when we hear AI, I think there's just a lot, like everyone kind of forms their own opinion about what that actually means. Today, we are talking specifically Chat GPT and copy words, how you can use Chat GPT to make better words for your business. Clearly, I need that. So, Masha, I know you've got a few tips to share with us. So let's go. Buckle up, everybody.
Sounds good. So I was thinking I'm going to share a few tips. The tips to use with ChatGPT to make your messaging stronger and to make it easier to really get to know your audience. And this has really to do with the first tip. So the first tip is the way I use ChatGPT. So this is actually how I use it. It's always open on my second screen. You know, this is like my go-to tool for certain things, not so much for writing, but mostly for rewriting, research, analysis, market research. And I'll share the first tip. And that's when you are, maybe you're going through a pivot in your business. Maybe you want to, this is what I often hear from my clients and people that come to me for various website audits. They are pivoting in terms of their audience. They want to attract a better client, like a dream client or just a more premium client. But how do you possibly know about that client if you've never worked with one? So that's where ChatGPT comes in. So the way I use it and the way I suggest interior designers give it a go is create this focus group, meaning let's say you want to attract 3 different types of clients, because typically in our businesses, copywriting business, interior design business, other creative entrepreneurial businesses, we all have different types of clients. It's not just one single client, because when I ask my clients, well, describe to me your ideal client, it's never just, well, this is, 40 to 50. It's always different types of groups. So I suggest creating this focus group between, let's say, 3 to 4 type of clients, and describe those clients, literally describe, like, think about one particular person that you want to attract. Describe them in as much detail as you possibly can. Things like, let's say she is between 45 and 50. She, does fitness. She works out. She works as a consultant, basically going into a lot of detail, describing that person, then naming her, then taking a second person, describing it the same way, but maybe she's something different. Maybe she no longer works. Maybe she's retired. Then take a third person, then put them in the same room inside ChatGPT and saying, okay, person like Jenny, Kathy, and Joanne are sitting in the same room. We all know we've given them descriptions, and now let them answer your questions. So you feed questions saying things like,
whoa,
what's important to you in your home? Let's say you are hiring an interior designer. What's a non-negotiable? What do you like to do in your spare time? And have each person that you created, each person in your ideal audience, kind of like the 3 avatars that you created, have them respond to those questions. You get the juiciest details ever, because you now have a perspective from each of those audience types in terms of what other questions do I use? Give them information. How do you like to vacation? What do you love to bring back? What's important at a home? What's important in hiring an interior designer? What's a quality that you admire? Things like that. You can ask them anything.
We're not talking just demographics. It's not they're between 45 and 50 and they make this much a year and they live in this area, but that can be part of it.
Yes.
It's like there's a word for it's like sociographics. There's other things and lifestyle preferences and
Yeah.
Okay, so
you want to go beyond that. You basically want to go beyond the typical demographic information that we feed them. We want to, and I think we were chatting with you right before we went live. It's so important to prompt it accurately because garbage in, garbage out. If you're not inputting the right type of information into Chat GPT, if you're kind of staying very surfacey, you're not going to get a lot of rich data, rich audience insights. So you want to make sure to feed it as many details as you can.
So let's back up for a hot second, because I'm sure some people are like, what do you mean feed Chat? Like, what are you talking about?
Okay.
So, yeah. Can you explain a little, like, let's go
Yes.
real basic for a second. You've given us a great prompt, but what is a prompt, and how do you actually put something into Chat GPT to get good content out of it?
Yeah, great question. So Chat GPT, it'll open up on your screen. I'm just opening Chat GPT to kind of see, okay, when you open up Chat GPT, let's say you registered for a free trial or whatever it is. I use the Chat GPT 4, which is the paid version, like 20 or 25 bucks a month. But there is 3.5 is a free version of Chat GPT. You registered, it'll have a little kind of, I guess, field where you input information. And that's where you create your prompt. So you'll create your prompt and say, I am an interior designer, da 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 da. You talk a little bit about yourself. I have 3 ideal clients. And then you describe Jenny is 55. She works on such and such. She likes to spend time like this. She owns a jet. She likes to vacation. It's funny that we laugh about it, but I had a client whose clients all owned jets. So
yes, and if you want that jet owning client, put it in Chat GPT, even if your clients don't own jets yet. This is to help get you where you want to be.
Exactly. And the reason why I had to include this type of information, when I write for interior design clients, I actually talk to them. So I interview them. But let's say you're not hiring, you're not in a position to hire anybody to interview your clients, to get to know these clients. That's how you use ChatGPT. So use it and basically prompt it. So that's what it's called. It's called prompt. When you basically describe the thing that you want to describe, and then what you want the output to be, what you want to receive in the end. And what you want at the end, after you've entered the information about your audience or these 3 ideal clients, you want to understand, how do they think? What motivates them? What do they aspire to be? Because at the end of the day, when we create copy, whether it's on your social media or on your website, you want it to resonate with those ideal clients. That's the only way it's going to work. You want to attract a certain kind of client, but in order for you to attract a certain kind of client, it has to speak to them emotionally. And that's why we're collecting these bits and pieces about this ideal audience. That's why it's so interesting to get this information from, like, make them have conversation inside ChatGPT, literally ask them, hey, I'm going to ask you 10 questions. Each one of you, the 3 types of audience, respond to that question. And what ChatGPT will spit out is basically a conversation. Your first ideal client, let's say Jenny, responds that she wants to vacation in exotic places. She loves bringing back, I don't know, whatever you ask her. And it'll be amazing. I promise you, if you try this and make conversation and respond to your questions, it's like being in the room.
Well, this is cool. So it goes beyond, and not that, like, ChatGPT is great at this too, but this is not just create some social media captions for me or help write this headline. It's help me get in the head of my ideal client. So cool, Masha.
Yeah, you're basically, the goal is to try to understand your ideal client a little bit better on a more emotional level, to try to understand how they think, how do they make decisions, what motivates them, what are they worried about? Like, what are some of the hesitations that they have? Because typically when I ask interior designers, well, what are the objections that your interior design clients have? Most of the times, like 9 out of 10, they tell me, oh, it's the investment. It's too much money. But it's not just that. Sometimes it's the process. Sometimes they're not sure how much hand holding you will be able to give them in a matter of in the process of a project, or how long the project will be, or what if they don't like the design? What happens then? So you want to get into their head. Like you said, you want to get into their head, and ChatGPT can help you do that.
Love it.
Yeah. So that's focus group. Let's move on to tip number 2. Coming up with a compelling intro for anything. It could be for an email. It could be for social media. So you just talked about, I think that's how most interior designers I could be wrong, but I think that's how most people would use ChatGPT. Hey, write me an Instagram caption about such and such, right? But here I'm talking about specifically about the first line. The first line, the compelling intro or the hook, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
That will determine whether your post will be actually read or people will actually click on it or just scroll by it. So I focus a lot more on the first line of anything than the rest of the body.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you want to prompt ChatGPT saying, hey, take this post, say you've written the post, or say you've had ChatGPT help you write this post. Then you want to continue refining it. So you want to say, hey, I don't like this line. And that's how I talk to my ChatGPT. I'm like, what? Like, what? How'd you like that? So like, you should see these conversations that I have with ChatGPT. I'm like, no, I don't like that. Make the first line a lot more engaging. Use power words or emotional words, or create it in a way that it's impossible to scroll by, So basically you want to encourage people to click on that first line. So you want to continuously refine the first line.
That's such a great tip, Masha, because obviously, all the content matters, but the way humans read things, we're going to be scanning and reading that first sentence, that headline, that first part of whatever it is. So I love that. So that's where you really want to put your focus and attention and energy.
Absolutely. In social media posts and in emails, if you have a newsletter, that's subject lines and first lines and pre-header text, like the preview pane in your email. That's where I would focus all of my attention because, in my inbox, I don't click probably on 95% of the stuff that comes in, but if something catches my attention, that's what I click on. And that's what you want to do. So get ChatGPT to help with that.
Love it.
Yeah. So that's the second one. The third one is rewriting something in the audience-centric tone. So a lot of times on our websites and on a lot of interior design websites, it's all about us.
Yeah.
This is what we do. This is how we do. This is our process. We help with this. It's all we.
Yeah.
But what it should be about is actually about your audience. And we all know that, but sometimes it's very hard to actually tweak that text.
Yes.
But oftentimes it's a simple reframe of the same information that shows up. And ChatGPT is amazing at that. Not always. Sometimes it involves a bit of refining. But basically, let's say you figured out that this section on your website is very much you-centered. Take that section, put it inside ChatGPT, and basically say, hey, make it audience-centric. Make it speak to my clients. Make it more about them than about you. And it can literally take and reframe the same information. It's still about your business. It's still about your interior design process, about your brand, but it's speaking now to your audience. So whereas before it was, we do this, we do that, now it's, you will experience this and this.
So the message, the core heart is the same.
Yeah.
It is how it's being
delivered. And now it speaks to me. So now when I go to your website, I was like, oh, yes, that's me. That is me. This is the kind of challenge that I'm experiencing. So you can help me with that challenge. So at the end of the day, as an audience, as a prospect, I feel heard and understood in your copy on your website. And that's what you want to do.
Masha, I want to circle back to one little thing you mentioned in there about sometimes you need to finesse it. And I think that's a great point. I would say 99 times out of 100, you cannot just take what Chat GPT spits out and copy and paste it.
Don't ever do that.
Humanness back into it, make sure it reads okay.
Your personality, your brand voice, yes. Otherwise, because I'm not sure, I'm not very familiar. There's other experts who talk about Chat GPT because it's pulling that information from somewhere. Yeah. You don't want it to pull it from somewhere. You want it to speak about you, about your business, about your specific audience. So you want to put and kind of inject your own personality into whatever it spit out. So you're right. 95% or 97% of the time, you would want to continuously refine it or maybe embed a bit of storytelling, a bit of you in it.
Yeah, I think the real gift of Chat GPT is that we're not starting from a blank page and there's starting point. Exactly. And then you can tweak it versus I don't even know where to begin. For me, that's huge.
Same, absolutely. I'd rather start somewhere. However bad the starting point is, it is a starting point.
You
know what I mean? So yeah. So that was number 3. Number 4 is naming things. And this could be anything, naming a process, naming steps of the process, naming whatever it is in your welcome guide, naming steps or new phases of projects. This is so cool. So I have a framework that I use with my own clients. So I write website copy for interior designers, and I created a framework. It's a signature framework called Reveal. It took me probably 100 iterations to actually come up with that word reveal, because I went into Chat GPT and I played around for days and days and days. It was like, well, it has to say this, and these are the important elements of this framework, and it has to have R for research, E for evaluation, and finally it came up with the word reveal after like 100 different things. So if you have something to name, ChatGPT is amazing at that. And I'll give you an example. So I had this interior design client. She is a kitchen designer in New York. That must have been a couple of years ago that I was working with her. So she's a kitchen designer, and we wanted to come out. She's got a lot of personality. We wanted to come up with a fun process for her. So yes, it's a typical interior design process, but we wanted to give it a lot more personality, yet tie it to kitchen design. So the 3 steps in her process, we named. The first one about the whole discovery was let's dish. The second one, cooking up function. The third one, serving up perfection. It's so cool. Like, it's so very kitchen design. It's got a bit of personality. It's got a little bit of humor, very on brand for her. So that was just a fun way to use ChatGPT to come up with those names. So I really encourage you, if you have something to name, whether it's a new service offer or process, go for it, play around.
You know, I think a lot of designers and this is a bit of a sidebar, but it's important in this conversation. I think designers overlook kind of packaging or, naming their process, naming their experience. It's like, we do full service design and we start with the consultation and then we do this, and that is all well and good.
Yeah.
But can you package it? Can you give it a name? Can you make it seem like your own system, your own thing? I will tell you, like, there's a time management person I follow, and her method has a name versus someone else I follow. It's just like, here's how I teach time management. And they're both great and they both have great content. But I'm so drawn to the one that's like, it's this method and this is how I'm like, your stuff.
Yeah.
And I think this is just one subtle way that we can communicate. We know what the heck we're doing. We are professionals. We have a process. Yeah. And ChatGPT can help you package that up and present it in a way that does feel on brand. Like you said, Masha, It's in your voice. And it's succinct and tidy. And people go, yeah, I want to hire that designer. They know what they're doing.
And not only that, yes, it does highlight your credibility and basically shows you as a true professional, but it also differentiates you from others, because chances are that person that you follow, her process is probably similar, like 80% similar to other people in the same industry, yet she put her own twist on that. And that's what makes it so different, because like, ooh, unique framework, ooh, unique process. It sounds so professional. It sounds so like niche. So all of a sudden we show up a little bit differently in the eyes of our clients.
Yes.
So definitely play around. If you have something to name, ChatGPT is amazing for that, because I literally asked them, okay, give me 20 names for this process, because you're right, packaging is everything. And when I write copy for interior designers, when I ask them to provide their process, it all sounds the same. We start with the discovery and consultation, then we go into concept, then we go into procurement, like all those things, they all sound the same. And I always like, can we do something different? Can we do something fun? Again, it has to be on brand with you. And each brand has a different voice and personality, but you can still make it your own. Actually, that's another way you can use it. You can tweak the voice of whatever it is that you're using. Like, for example, if you want to sound a bit more elevated, a bit more refined, a bit more sophisticated, do that. Use ChatGPT to refine your voice to sound, I don't know, like I've used ChatGPT where I said, make it sound like it came from Elle Decor or Architectural Digest.
So you could take your existing block of copy, whether it's a caption or website blurb, and you can say, basically take this and make it sound like it belongs in Architectural Digest or Domino or House Beautiful or whatever.
When I was just learning ChatGPT like a year ago or a little over a year ago, we would go through various exercises, make it sound like George Clooney, make it sound like such and such. I don't know what George Clooney sounds like, but like make it sound like, and take a celebrity if you wanted to get that very specific way, like make it sound like Gary Vee. Like that's a very, you know what I mean?
That's a very strong voice. Yes.
You don't want to make it sound like Gary Vee, but yeah, that's how you play around. That's how you catch those nuances, and maybe that's how you develop your own voice. Sometimes you settle on something in between. You know, it's got a little bit of this, a little bit of that, because you do. At the end of the day, you do want to have your own voice, and sometimes you can get ChatGPT's help to develop that.
Love it. Okay.
Yeah. All right. And the last one is coming up with analogies and transitions. And I'll explain to you what it is. So for me, it's very difficult to come up with analogies. And sometimes that's what you really need to paint the picture, because there's this copywriting rule, show, don't tell, meaning it's not the same to just say, this is a phone, you know, this is just very flat, but you want to explain what it is. Well, it's got rounded corners and it's got reflective surface. All of a sudden, I'm getting this image. And when you use that kind of language on your website, on your social, you help your audience create this mental picture. So ChatGPT can actually help you create these analogies, storytelling, like make it sound a lot more interesting, a lot more descriptive. And sometimes, especially with social, how you can use ChatGPT with social. Let's say you're writing a post. You know that stories sell. You know that as soon as you incorporate an anecdote or some type of story, your post is going to get a lot more engagement. We know that. We tried that. But sometimes it's very difficult to go from a story, because I've used that before. Like for something happens and I'm like, oh, I want to put it on Instagram, but I'm like, but how do I tie it to something in my business? Because I don't want to just share a story that's completely irrelevant to my business. And that's when I use ChatGPT. I'm like, okay, here's the story that I want to talk about. Tie it to this. And then you explain what you want to tie it to. And it creates either an analogy or this transitional statement, meaning it's the same as this in your business. So oftentimes I talk about the emotional connection in your website messaging. And sometimes I would share a story, something seemingly completely irrelevant, but then if I created a transition from story to something in your business, it gives you that missing piece.
I keep saying I love that because I love all of it. Well, that's really neat, because you're right. There's a lot of stories in our everyday lives that we don't think of as being useful in our business.
Relevant, yeah.
And, you know, whether it's a story about you as a parent out shopping, making dinner, whatever it might be. If something stuck out in your mind, there's probably a way you can share that and tie it back to what you're doing.
Exactly.
If you ChatGPT correctly, and you're open to trying these new things. I know this is weird to be like, hello, robot man machine thing, make words for me. But there's so much it can do, and it's so powerful in taking what you put into it. And you said earlier, Masha, garbage in, garbage out. Like you've got to be smart with what you say to it and how you frame things. But it's really going to help you get unstuck. And I find ChatGPT's strength is just, it's a new perspective, and it gives you some new ideas. It just gets you out of like, here's what I know and what I'm thinking, to like, oh, hey, I hadn't thought of that. I really like that word, or this direction is really cool. That's how I can connect it back to my process or my business.
Yeah. And it's an incredible brainstorming tool. Even if you have a new idea of some sort, using ChatGPT like a brainstorming to help you brainstorm, or, you know, let's say you come up with an idea and you need to develop it. Like, let's say you want to come up with a way to repackage your service, repackage your process. Start there. Here's my process. It's got 5 steps. How can we add personality? How can we make it sound a little bit, fill in the blank, whatever you want it to sound like. And it can give you different ideas. Give me 10 ideas of how I can make it a lot more interesting and a lot more relevant to my audience. Here's what my audience cares about. ChatGPT on the back end will do its magic. It'll connect it to the emotional, you know, to the emotional things that your audience cares about, and to your actual process or whatever it is that you want to talk about. So
that's great. Okay. Can you
worth
repeat those
experimenting.
tips for us, Masha, the 5 tips that you shared?
So the 5 tips are running a focus group to better understand your clients, your ideal clients, coming up with a compelling intro or first line, rewriting something from the audience perspective, naming things, and coming up with transitions and analogies.
These are great. I mean, truly, I had only thought of like the first line, headline, or social captions. I'm like, there's so much more I can be doing that I'm not taking advantage of. Like you said, there is a free version that is great. So don't feel like you have to dive in
Oh,
to
absolutely. I will start free.
Yet. Yeah. I'm still noodling around with the free one, and it takes a little time, but saves you a ton of time on the back end once you've learned how to use it effectively.
Yeah, because I think we all started with, well, I don't know, I started a year ago, I started with rewrite this email. Let's say I was dealing with a difficult client. I'm like, okay, remove all the emotion from that email, rewrite it in a more nicer way. And that's the easiest. That's the kind of the, what do you call it? The most approachable way and most user-friendly way to use Chat GPT.
It's a good entry point into making it
exactly
workflow.
Yes. Yeah. So experiment for sure. Play around, experiment.
Awesome. Well, Masha, thank you so much. This was so insightful and amazing. Your website, contentvertical.com. There's a lot on there for our audience to check out, see Masha's services. Any final thoughts, Masha? Anything you want to leave us with?
No, but I would love for you to sign up to my newsletter. I kind of do the same thing in my newsletter. Every single Friday, I share a bunch of tips and tricks and very actionable advice specifically for interior designers. And you can find it on my website at contentvertical.com. And I also have a new podcast, Marketing for Designers.
You do. And it's a good one. You have an episode on AI there already, correct? Am
I do. I think so. Yes. It's either coming up or I already have it there. Yeah.
Awesome. So if this is something you're interested in, that's another great resource as well, where Masha goes a little bit deeper on the AI topic. All right. Thank you very much. We will see you again next month for Message Mastery.
Thanks, Lesley. Bye.